Redditors that host their home on Airbnb. What has been your worst experience with a guest? I used to travel a lot for work and I would put my apartment up on Airbnb while I was away. My apartment has a bunch of closets and drawers which I used to leave empty and at my guest's disposal. However, there is one closet in the bedroom which I kept locked cause it is where I keep my personal belongings. One time a guest left a bad review saying that the place had no storage space, which I was very confused about until I got home and saw my closet. Dude had tried to open it using brute force. The door was almost pulled off its hinges and the wood was chipped in some places. The door in question had 2 padlocks. And the perfectly usable closet on the opposite wall was untouched. Rented out to a group of 4 girls. Turns out they were going partying every day during their stay. I get called one day at 5 AM. It's the guard from my building telling me there's a passed out girl in the lobby's couch, puking and pissing herself. None of her friends had gone back to help her. Ruined the couch obviously. The next day they send me a message again. Another one of the girls had sprinted to the building stairs and also pissed herself. A friend of mine rented to a girl who was convinced that there were cameras hidden all around the unit. She dismantled the lighting fixtures, picture frames, medicine cabinets, remote controls, etc. Edit. This occurred in 2015. They were live-in hosts renting out the main part of their home. She also depotted plants, removed smoke detectors, hid all of the refrigerator magnets, and destroyed her cell phone. They were compensated by Airbnb. Thank you, Reddit, for an excuse to reach out to an old friend. Dude stole my $120 sneakers and broke my TV. We are live-in hosts, so we are present while guests stay in our spare room. A guest arrived and immediately announced that they had pooped himself during their journey. They then marked us down for cleanliness. Mate, you poop yourself. Also a guest who found a pair of my flip-flops in a wardrobe that they should not have opened. Then poop over the bathroom floor, ruining my favorite flip-flops in the process. Also, a guest who went out drinking for 10 hours before checking in, meaning I had to collect them from the taxi, put them in bed in the recovery position, check on them when I woke up for work, then call the taxi company on their behalf when it turned out they lost their phone. I worked in a call center that handles some of Airbnb's customer service. So, one guest murdered 2 people in the host's home and got arrested there. Another guest was from a culture that eats iguanas and barbecued up a 7-year-old girl's pet iguana to serve to the family as thanks for hosting him. Another guest filled a mug with human shit and left it in the host's microwave. You really lose all faith in humanity working in customer service call centers. Editing to Airbnb requires photo evidence for all host complaints. And guess who is the first to see them? The initial customer service agent, who may only be on their first or second day taking calls. And the iguana man was forced to pay for both a new barbecue for the family and a replacement iguana. Not a host, but I stayed at an Airbnb that rented 2 rooms. I was in bed and hear the other guest, a man and women, return. They're loud and drunk, but nothing crazy. About 10 minutes later I hear what I thought was them having sex, but then quickly realize it's someone getting hit. The host and I both hear this. The host starts knocking on the door, asking what's going on and to open the door. The woman opens the door and her lip is split wide open. She's bleeding all down her shirt. The guy's in the room, but runs out with a backpack and leaves. He's taken both of their cell phones and wallets. The police show up and everyone gives statements. They found him walking down the road and he found different accommodations at the police station. I slept fine. The room was Harry Potter themed, so I still left 5 stars. Carpets? Jizzed. Curtains? Jizzed. Dining table? Jizzed. Sink? Jizzed. Sheets? Somehow survived unjizzed. A guy I work with told this story how he hired a maid through a referral from his friend. She was great apparently and asked to stay there a couple times when he was gone. After he agreed to let her stay a few weeks when it wasn't being rented however, she ghosted him. He ended up calling the cops and they checked up on her. She was there and although nervous, everything seemed normal. She later got a hold of him and asked to stay longer. He said no. Clean it and get out. He comes back randomly to his house at 5 AM a few days later to someone sleeping in his downstairs room with dirty dishes and cigarette butts everywhere. Ends up it's this maid's heroin addicted husband. He had been using it as a flop house and drug den. This guy escorted the husband out by gunpoint pantsless. The place was trashed downstairs, but apparently perfectly clean still upstairs. His TV was stolen but the husband brought it back and left it in the driveway so he didn't get charged with theft. Apparently there was little he could do about the free stay the husband took advantage of. My friend's Airbnb guest taught their kitten to meow once. And then the quietest sweet needy cat turned loud and needy. Twas a curse that kept on giving long after he left. My partner looks after an Airbnb for his friend. Self-catering only. The house is an 1800s big country house. It is used primarily for large get-togethers and parties. Most guests are great and clean up well to get their deposit back. A group stayed and left the place pretty messy, but we couldn't figure out what the smell was. Turns out they left a full pig in a rubbish bag under the kitchen table. They tried to cook a pig on a spit and basically left its mainly raw corpse under the table. Every toilet was destroyed too. Must have eaten the semi-charred meat on the outside of the pig when drinking without realizing that it was for crying out or sorry Gordon Ramsay. My mum did this. She had some people from out of country come stay. They moved the furniture around, swapped and most mattresses, left a massive pile of dishes in the kitchen. The bathroom was all buggered. And they must have been cooking and smashing clams or oysters shelling and around the BBQ outside. I went over to help my mum out a little after work for a bit. But it was a 2-day minimum cleanup job she had to do. Mum even had to bring in a cleaner lady to help as well. Needless to say, the people who stayed didn't get their deposit back and got a file reported on them. I hosted for a few years as a superhost. And frankly I had lovely guests, very cool, intelligent, well-traveled, interesting people from all over the world. They were all pretty tidy too and considerate. The only annoying thing was people who talked way too much. Normally, people would exchange pleasantries and we'd chit-chat for a bit, which is totally fine and welcome. But every once in a while, I'd get a guest who talked non-stop from the time they got in until they went to bed. The rental suite was fantastic, like its own separate apartment fully stocked with everything I would want if I were a guest. And yet, there were a few people who had to hang out on my floor and talk. When I got an overtalker, sometimes I would hide when I heard them coming, so they'd go ahead to their floor. BC, I just could not stand someone talking at me from 7 PM until 11 PM. Not a host. Was a guest. We stayed in a carriage house that was split into 2 apartments in Savannah. The host was the most wonderful southern personality I've ever encountered. Around 3 AM I woke up to a loud banging noise. Like someone trying to break down a door. It got loud and louder. And eventually sounded violent. This went on for 20 minutes before my GF got out of bed and politely asked the neighboring guests to be quiet. They remained quiet for another 20 minutes and then they were at it again. This time much louder. Drunkenly they locked themselves out and decided that breaking the door down was their only option. The next morning when we left, the deadbolt was knocked out. The entire door frame was stripped off and the door was smashed to bits. We felt so bad for the host. It was going into a holiday and she had to cancel the next guest's stay because of the damage. Stupid drunk college kids. These ladies got locked out because all 3 didn't bring any of the spare keys. I had to leave a meeting since they demanded I let them inside. Since I left them all spares and my original, Had to climb up 2 stories by building a makeshift Marv from Home Alone style stack of boxes and break in my own apartment to open the door from the inside for them. They gave me my only negative rating out of about 20. Not my cabin. But in Tahoe they did something with Airbnbs where people could offer them to people affected by the Paradise Fire. My friend's family, out of the kindness of their heart, opened their cabin. And someone who apparently hadn't even been affected by the fire used a fake name. And they stripped the cabin of anything that could be seen as valuable. His grandpa's ice axe, snowshoes, all kinds of other old stuff like that. They even took all the pots, pans, silverware, plates, everything. Worth mentioning. I have 2 friends who own a few in a mountain town in SoCal. They say the cleanest and most respectful people are when they rent it to porn companies. Lol. They say families will legitimately trash the place, yet the porn companies always clean up. I know a girl that did it and guests broke her globe and glued it back together with all the wrong countries joined together. They also spilled a pint of water on the rug and just left it, which made a big circle watermark on the wooden floor. She was a bit fussy about hygiene, so I was surprised that she didn't mind loads of strangers doing all sorts in her bed. It is baffling. Clearly the lure of money is great for some people. I used Airbnb to rent out a military camper truck I built. I only had 1 guest and 1 horrible experience. I will never be a host again. The first guest was on Airbnb for a couple years and had a few reviews from hosts that were good. Anyways, the guest forced open my RV gate, parked his vehicle in my backyard, and then 3 more guests, only 1 guest was booked, and a dog. I had a no pet policy, proceed into my motorhome. The next day comes and it's time for them to leave. But they won't leave. I had to sit outside the door and wait for them to get ready. They begged to stay, but I had a very strong feeling something was wrong. Inside, I found very short straws with burnt ends and burned aluminum foil around the camper. I figured out that they were probably freebasing heroin. They also managed to completely fill up the grey water tank and black water tank. Later, I found out that the rental car was most likely stolen and they were hiding it from the police. Airbnb was pathetic in the lack of customer support during the experience and after. I've never hosted, but I stayed one night at this place in San Bruno near SFO. Cheap little shared place just to be close to the airport for an early ass flight. The guy was extremely particular about cleanliness. And I get it, I do. But for someone who makes you take your shoes off at the door, he should really consider cleaning under the goddamn bidet once in a while. I had never used one before. Didn't know how to. And was way too tired to try to figure it out. But I'm glad I didn't. Anyway. With everything looking so immaculately clean, the smell of stale piss and poop coming from the toilet really threw me for a loop. You know that smell? It's like stale poop. I bent over and looked at the underside of whatever part of the bidet was within the rim of the toilet. And yep. Apparently never cleaned. I really wanted to leave a bad review because of that. But we arrived like an hour late and didn't give any warning and felt bad about that, so I didn't. I clean for 1. Saw some guests pull in. 7 people get out. Several things wrong with that. The car could only seat 5. When they booked they said there were only going to be 2 guests staying there. They complained the whole time they were there about how things didn't work. Wasn't true. Thankfully I never cleaned up after the 7 people. The place also only had 3 bedrooms. First time we hosted some high schoolers through a party. The wood floors were covered in a layer of dried beer. Someone jumped from the top of the stairs, landing on the couch and breaking it in 2. Glass in the pool. Who knows what else. Another time someone completely dismantled the surround sound speaker system and left a huge mess of tangled wires. Just why? I'm not old enough to rent a home, but this comes from my dad. Short and simple. When we came back home we found a lot of blood in the kitchen. And a cut off thumb. And my dad's bedroom smelled like someone had hanky-panky for at least 2 hours. Never hosted. but I stayed at a rental house a few years back while visiting my wife's family out of town. We stayed at this nice little cottage style house with plenty of amenities. There was a hot tub, BBQ, nice outdoor patio area, etc. We didn't use any of it because we were only there to sleep. We get home and receive an email from the owner that she is keeping the security deposit because we destroyed the BBQ and broke several deck boards on her patio. She didn't believe that we hadn't even touched these areas. There was plenty of back and forth before she agreed to drop it and give back 90% of the deposit.
Hi there. Look, if you enjoyed the video, well, why not go ahead and hit that like and subscribe to Reddit Stories. In fact, if you want to see even more responses to this thread, well then, take a look. There's the link in the description below. And remember, show some love to those authors while you're there. And I look forward to seeing you next time.